dragged me. My shirt was ripped open. My pants from being dragged were starting to come down.
From Holly Beecher fighting to stay alive as the miner ripped off her clothes.
She was unconscious for approximately 60 to 70 minutes.
To another wounded female cop who chose to stay anonymous following a battle with a 19-year-old.
It was the worst feeling knowing that no one's there to help you.
These were the female cops who thought they were in control until they were locked in cell of these evil kids. Desmond Bellegarde versus Holly Beecher, trapped, beaten, and left behind. They told Holly Beecher the unit was secured, that Desmond Bellegarde had been restrained, that nothing like this would happen, not under their watch. But on that cold morning inside Green Hill School's most dangerous ward, all those promises evaporated with the click of a faulty cell door. Desmond wasn't just evil, he was trained. At only 17, he'd already survived shootouts, run crews, and learned how to manipulate every weakness in the system. Holly didn't even realize she was walking into a setup until he smiled. That's when he rushed her, not with wild fists, but with chilling precision. His aim, her keys, his motive, power, it wasn't personal, it was tactical. Holly raised her arm to create distance, but in her own words, she never stood a chance.
Got in my face, I had lifted my arm to tell him, hey, get out of my space, and he had smacked my arm down.
With a single blow, Desmond neutralized her defense. Then he ripped open her shirt, dragged her across the cement floor, and nearly exposed her to a cell full of other teens. Her cries weren't heard, her emergency beacon didn't work, and the cameras only caught what King 5 News would later describe as a slow-motion mugging with zero interruption. The most shocking part, it took another teen to step in before the staff did.
It lasted almost 30 seconds before someone came to help. Another juvenile offender.
This wasn't a fluke. Green Hill's overcrowding had been an open secret for years. Juvenile offenders were stacked in beyond capacity. Staff-to-inmate ratios were at dangerous lows, and the lack of resources meant proper emergency training was often skipped or ignored. Beecher wasn't just attacked, she was sacrificed by a system that placed efficiency over safety. Desmond's added 5-year sentence was a hollow victory. Beecher couldn't return to full duty. She struggled to drive, to read, to play with her kids. She told reporters she prayed for her vision back so she could simply read to her children again. Desmond, he's now transferred to adult custody, his violence too extreme for juvenile halls. But this incident didn't stop the culture of abuse, because in the next facility, a group of young offenders weren't just violent, they were trained to terrorize women, and the officers, they watched, like it was a show. The gladiator fights of Los Padrinos, female guards, like Officer Maya, watched in horror. Officer Maya Cisneros had been reassigned to Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, thinking it would be a fresh start, a cleaner unit, more structure, and, according to her supervisors, low-risk youth. But no one warned her that the facility had turned into a war zone where gang-affiliated minors were being forced to fight, and sometimes female officers were ordered to stand down and just watch. That's not a metaphor. This wasn't just neglect, it was orchestrated. Between July and December 2023, at least 70 unauthorized fights occurred under Officer Maya's watch, not by her choice, but under threat of retaliation from fellow officers. Surveillance video shows staff standing by as 2 teens brawled in a cell block, while others gathered to cheer them on like it was pay-per-view.
30 officers at a juvenile detention facility in Southern California have been charged for their alleged roles in so-called, quote, gladiator fights between youth and their care.
But Officer Maya was one of the few who tried to stop it. She filed internal complaints. She approached supervisors. Her calls were ignored. One lieutenant even warned her to let the boys sort it out or risk reassignment. The true horror unfolded one night when 2 teens were pitted against each other in what Maya would later describe as a bloodletting. One was 16, the other just 13. Both walked away with broken ribs and concussions, and yes, it was filmed.
Officers allowed nearly 70 fights to take place between July and December 2023 at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. More than 140 victims between the ages of 12 and 18 were involved.
The indictment that followed confirmed what Maya already knew. Staff had conspired to stage these fights. Many of the juveniles were under duress, either physically coerced or promised perks. The guards would gamble. Some even placed bets. These were children. But inside Los Padrinos, they were commodities. By the time prosecutors stepped in, it was too late for many victims. Some left with permanent disabilities, others with untreated PTSD. Maya herself was terminated for breaching chain of command protocol when she leaked internal messages to the media. But her whistleblowing saved lives. Today, Maya is rebuilding her life. No badge, no benefits, but she says she sleeps better knowing she told the truth. As for the officers who ran the fights, many are awaiting trial for child endangerment, battery, and conspiracy. Still, the cycle of violence continues elsewhere, because in the next case, we meet the teen who manipulated a female guard emotionally before launching a sneak attack that almost turned deadly, and this time there were no cameras at all. Carmen Wills and Tyler Jenks, the teen who faked redemption to strike. Carmen Wills was good at her job, strict but understanding, tough yet compassionate. She was known across Rockville Juvenile Correctional Center as Ms. Wills, the one who listens. But that reputation made her vulnerable, especially to someone like Tyler Jenks. Tyler wasn't your average 15-year-old offender. Charged with arson, animal cruelty, and aggravated assault, he had already bounced between 5 facilities in 2 years. His file was flagged: manipulative tendencies, charismatic liar, emotionally coercive. But when he met Officer Wills, he played the part of the reformed soul perfectly. He talked about reading books, mentioned he wanted to be a firefighter. He'd cry during mentoring sessions. Carmen, who had no children of her own, saw potential in him. She even put him in charge of cleaning the staff wing, unsupervised. That's when the setup began. According to an internal report later leaked to the press, Tyler used those moments alone to hide a makeshift weapon, a sharpened toothbrush, inside a vent near the guard's locker room. He studied Carmen's routine, knew what time she changed shifts. He even got another teen to distract the security team by starting a fire in the laundry block. It all came to a head during what seemed like a quiet Thursday afternoon. Carmen walked into the wing, alone, after helping with an intake upstairs. Tyler was waiting. He lunged, not with a punch, but with that sharpened toothbrush in hand, aimed directly at her throat. Carmen turned just in time to take the blow across her shoulder. She fell, slamming into the lockers, as Tyler jumped on top of her. According to the later disciplinary hearing, he yelled, "You lied just like my mother," while trying to stab her again. There were no cameras in that hallway. It took 2 minutes before another officer responded. By then, Carmen was unconscious, bleeding, and bruised. Her clavicle was fractured. She would later undergo 3 surgeries and months of therapy for nerve damage in her left arm. Tyler, he was transferred to adult court and later sentenced to 12 years under blended sentencing for attempted murder and custodial assault. The worst part? He never apologized. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a plan. As the reviewing psychiatrist put it, Tyler exhibited classic psychopathy, cold planning, strategic manipulation, and lack of remorse. Carmen hasn't returned to corrections work since. She now works as a high school janitor by choice. "I don't want to be around people I can't see coming," she told reporters. But this kind of calculated brutality wasn't unique to Tyler. In the next story, we meet twins who turned juvenile lockup into their personal lab for chaos, manipulating rival inmates into violence and weaponizing female guards against one another. Part 5. The Dorsey Twins and Officer, Aaliyah Grant. When evil came in pairs, they weren't just troublemakers, they were tactical terrorists. 2 teenage brothers, Malik and Marlon Dorsey, known in the South Carolina Juvenile Authority system as the Twins. But what made them dangerous wasn't their size or their criminal records, it was their intelligence. By 16, they had already orchestrated the beating of another inmate using only a chess piece and a folded note. By 17, they'd been transferred to 3 separate high-risk units for inciting violence, manipulating female guards, and making coded threats. But it was what they did to Officer Aaliyah Grant that forced the facility to reevaluate its entire communication system. Grant was new, transferred from the women's wing to male Gen Pop after just 4 months. Her training was thin, and the Dorsey twins saw it immediately. Malik played the quiet one, Marlon the protector. They spoke in riddles, asked Aaliyah about her vibe, complimented her posture. She ignored it at first, until they started passing her notes about their progress. One note slipped into her coat pocket, read, "Miss G, we're done with the violence. You made us think." She thought they were changing, so when they asked her to pass a birthday card to another unit for a former friend, she agreed. What she didn't know was the envelope contained a list of names, cell numbers, and a schedule of guard rotation. It was a blueprint for a coordinated brawl across 2 units. The following Saturday, 4 fights broke out in under 10 minutes. Staff were overwhelmed. One juvenile had to be airlifted with a collapsed lung. Another officer, also a woman, suffered a dislocated jaw after trying to break up a melee. A review of security footage and internal memos traced the message back to Aaliyah. She was interrogated, placed on leave, and later demoted. Though she was never charged, she admitted during a debrief that the Dorsey twins got inside her head. It wasn't a romance, it was psychological warfare. Facility officials now use her story during onboarding to train officers against manipulative communication. One investigator later told CNN, "The Dorsey twins knew exactly how to exploit trust, and they knew to start with the rookies. Malik and Marlon, they were eventually split, one sent to Kentucky, the other to Arizona. But staff say the chaos they caused lasted long after their departure, and they weren't done. Both are currently awaiting hearings for attempted attempted incitement in their new facilities. But the next story is even more disturbing. It's about a teen girl who lured a female officer into isolation, staged a fake panic attack, and attacked with a smuggled piece of sharpened glass. Danica Ray and Officer Leslie Morgan, the panic attack that was actually a trap. Officer Leslie Morgan had heard the whispers. Watch out for that girl. She's not right in the head. But when she first met Danica Ray, the 16-year-old inmate with soft eyes and delicate mannerisms, Leslie wasn't convinced. Danica came across as quiet, even frail, more like a trauma victim than someone accused of triple homicide, including the slaying of her own foster parents. But everything changed the day Danica faked a breakdown. It was during afternoon block checks. Danica was seated cross-legged in the corner of her room, rocking back and forth, mumbling to herself. She'd refused food all day and smeared toothpaste across her mattress. Other officers had marked it down as a mental health red flag, so they called for Leslie. Leslie entered alone, equipped with a notepad, a calm voice, and a smile. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Danica had shattered a mirror 2 days earlier and had been hiding a sliver of glass beneath the seam of her cot. According to an incident report later obtained by reporters, Danica whispered, "I can't breathe. I need to lie down." And as Leslie bent forward to assist her, she struck. The first slice went across Leslie's cheek. The second, aimed directly at her eye, was only stopped by reflex and a last-second twist of her head. Leslie fell backward, blood pouring from her face, as Danica stood over her screaming, "You're not my mother!" There were no other staff within 50 feet. A security alert finally triggered from Leslie's badge, and it took 98 seconds for 2 male officers to arrive and restrain Danica. By that point, Leslie was already unconscious from blood loss. In an exclusive staff memo leaked 2 months later, medical staff described Leslie's wounds as severe facial trauma with permanent nerve damage. She would never return to duty. Danica, after a months-long hearing, she was transferred to a psychiatric forensic unit in upstate New York under a blended sentence. Though she will remain under supervision for the rest of her life, she may be eligible for limited public contact at age 30. Her case was cited during the 2024 legislative hearing on officer vulnerabilities in female-led units. As one lawmaker put it, "If the state cannot provide panic buttons that work, we are sending our staff into cages without locks." Officer Leslie Morgan now works as a victims' rights advocate and speaks to trainees about misjudging female inmates. "Danica wasn't a little girl in trouble," she told an audience once. "She was evil in soft skin." But what happens when multiple girls run the block? Because the next story involves a trio of teen girls known as the Black Widows, who used charm, violence, and seduction to dominate a wing and nearly cost one female sergeant her life. The Black Widows and Sergeant Elena Cruz, when flirtation turned fatal. Sergeant Elena Cruz had faced it all: brawls, lockdowns, even riots, but nothing prepared her for the psychological warfare waged by 3 teenage girls who called themselves the Black Widows. Officially, they were known as Marsha Momo Dixon, Jalen Hart, and Evie Slade, each just 17 years old. But together, they operated more like a cartel than a clique. Their rap sheets included armed robbery, assault, and in Jalen's case, a suspected connection to a local gang hit gone wrong. They didn't just rule their block, they owned it. And when Sergeant Cruz was assigned to oversee their wing, she became their new target. It started slow. Evie would compliment her jewelry. Momo would ask about her lipstick. Jalen would linger in doorways, flashing knowing smiles. All of it designed to throw Sergeant Cruz off balance. According to internal memos obtained from the Department of Juvenile Justice, the trio had already manipulated 2 male officers into smuggling in contraband, one of whom was later fired after being caught in a sting involving vape pens and prepaid cards. Sergeant Cruz tried to shut it down. She filed warnings, rewrote rotation schedules, but she couldn't stop what came next. On September 9th, 2024, during routine checks, Evie faked a seizure. Cruz, trained in emergency response, rushed into her cell, but just as she knelt to check Evie's pulse, Momo appeared behind her. There were no cameras. The cell's feed had mysteriously gone down earlier in the day. Within seconds, Cruz was struck in the head with a chair leg that had been hidden under Evie's mattress. She collapsed. Jalen joined in, holding Cruz down while Evie tried to choke her with a torn bedsheet. It took a full 3 minutes before backup arrived. One juvenile staffer later testified that he froze, paralyzed by the chaos, while another admitted he didn't intervene because he thought it was just girl drama. Cruz survived, but just barely. She suffered a fractured skull, a torn retina, and severe PTSD. Her family told NBC she didn't speak for 2 weeks. The girls were separated and transferred to high-security facilities in different states. Each faced additional charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit custodial assault, and witness intimidation. But as prosecutors dug deeper, they found an unsettling twist. The trio had compiled a hit list, 5 female officers, each marked by nickname, schedule, and threat level. Cruz was labeled most feared, most important to break. It wasn't a crime of passion, it was a strategy. Sergeant Cruz never returned to the facility. Today, she runs a private security firm and lectures on female-targeted violence in juvenile halls. Still, the impact of the Black Widows lingers. Next, a 15-year-old with a genius IQ used his charm to get a female guard to smuggle in drugs and walked free while she faced 12 years behind bars. Jared Phelps and Officer Tonya Wells, the teen genius who outsmarted the system. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't throw a punch, he didn't even curse. But what Jared Phelps did to Officer Tonya Wells cost her her freedom, her pension, and her child custody rights, all before his 16th birthday. Jared was considered a model inmate. Detained at Holston Juvenile Facility on charges of computer fraud and identity theft, he was unlike the others. He quoted Shakespeare, spoke fluent Spanish, and had a tested IQ of 146. Staff said he was the only inmate who could fix the facility printer without help. Officer Tonya Wells was 31, newly divorced, and recently reassigned to Holston's education unit. She taught GED prep. Jared was her top student. What began as intellectual admiration quickly evolved into late-night tutoring, then personal conversations, then shared jokes that blurred every line. Security logs later revealed Jared began requesting Wells for emotional safety checks at odd hours, one in particular at 11:47 p.m., just days before things went sideways. By the time facility leadership got suspicious, it was too late. According to an FBI affidavit released months later, Jared had convinced Wells to smuggle in 2 vials of liquid fentanyl hidden inside a marker casing. He promised he'd trade the formula for a chemical code he said could neutralize opioids on the streets. It was all a lie. Jared resold the drugs through a contraband ring he orchestrated using phone privileges and fellow teens with burner accounts. The operation stretched across 3 counties before federal agents intercepted a message between Jared and an outside mule. Wells was arrested inside the facility. She had no criminal record, no history of misconduct, but she was charged with distribution of a controlled substance, conspiracy, and endangering a minor. Prosecutors offered her a plea, 12 years in federal prison. Jared, too young for federal prosecution. He was held for 6 months in a psychiatric juvenile center and released to his family under a conditional monitoring program. He now attends a private academy under a new name. His record? Sealed. When asked how he convinced an adult to smuggle narcotics, Jared simply replied, "People like her want to be needed. I just made her feel irreplaceable." Wells' family has since severed ties. Her daughter is being raised by her sister. And Jared? He's rumored to be selling essays to college students under a fake profile. The Office of the Inspector General called this case the most sophisticated manipulation by a minor in state detention within the last 5 years. And the next story, it's even darker, because this time it wasn't about manipulation or obsession. It was about revenge, and it ended in the death of a female officer who never even saw it coming. Kellen Voss and Lieutenant Dana Shields, the ambush that should never have happened. Lieutenant Dana Shields was a legend at West Ridge Juvenile Facility. 20 years in, 5 commendations, 2 riot de-escalations, and not a single complaint on her record. She was known for her fairness, her composure, and her fierce protection of junior staff, especially younger female officers. But none of that mattered to Kellen Voss. To him, Dana was the symbol of a system he vowed to destroy. At just 17, Kellen had already been labeled a violent ideologue. He wasn't gang-affiliated, he wasn't looking for respect, he was looking for chaos. He wrote manifestos in his cell, long, rambling essays blaming women for everything from his foster care failures to his latest conviction for setting fire to a group home. Staff knew he was dangerous. What they didn't know was how patient he could be. Over 5 weeks, Kellen pretended to change. He stopped yelling, stopped threatening. He even volunteered for janitorial duty in the admin wing, which placed him in close proximity to Lieutenant Shields' office. She believed in second chances. So when he asked to speak with her alone, just to say thank you for not giving up on me, she agreed. He waited until the wing was empty. Surveillance cameras had been down for routine maintenance, according to the incident audit from the facility's oversight committee. Dana walked in at 4:08 p.m. Kellen was already seated. What happened next was so fast, officers only caught the tail end. Kellen had broken a plastic broom handle into 2 jagged points, sharpened against a metal bed frame. He lunged the moment she stepped inside, stabbing her twice in the neck and once in the chest. She collapsed within seconds. By the time staff responded, Kellen had covered her in a facility-issued blanket and sat calmly beside her, humming. A nurse later testified that he smiled as Dana gasped for breath. Paramedics declared her dead at 4:23 p.m. The fallout was instant. The facility went into a week-long lockdown. Staff were rotated. The warden resigned. The National Center for Juvenile Justice called it the most preventable staff death in a secure juvenile setting in over a decade. Kellen Voss was moved under maximum federal custody within 48 hours and charged as an adult with first-degree murder. He showed no emotion in court. His only statement? "Now someone listens to me." Dana's funeral was attended by over 500 officers and advocates. Her death became a turning point, used in national policy discussions to highlight the specific dangers female officers face when showing compassion inside high-risk male units. To this day, a memorial plaque sits outside West Ridge with her words, "They're kids, not monsters." But as this case showed, some kids truly are monsters. This next teen was twisted, and the female officer who found what he left behind, she was never the same again. Damian Cole and Officer Janine Torres, the cannibal kid no one was ready for. When Officer Janine Torres got the call to check on cell B18, it was supposed to be routine, a welfare check on a kid who hadn't shown up for group therapy. What she found inside that cell would haunt her for the rest of her life. The inmate was Damian Cole, a 16-year-old with no prior violent history before his arrest, at least not on paper. Officially, Damian had been picked up for kidnapping and mutilation of a neighbor's dog, but local police reports hinted at something darker: bones missing from the scene, strange markings carved into trees near the site, and a diary filled with grotesque fantasies involving human flesh. Even before the incident, other inmates avoided him. One reportedly told a counselor, "That kid don't blink. He just stares like he's reading your meat." No one took it seriously, until Officer Torres opened that door. Inside cell B18, she found Damian sitting cross-legged, naked from the waist up, covered in something thick and red. At first, she thought it was a suicide attempt, but there was no blood on him, only on the mattress. Then she saw it. On the floor, beside his bed, lay the severed remains of a raccoon, missing skin and half its skull. The animal had been smuggled in, how they still don't know, but what shocked Janine most wasn't the carcass. It was what Damian said as she backed away in horror. "I wanted to see what it felt like before I try it on a person." Security rushed in, restrained him, and shut down the entire unit. The mattress, the bed sheets, and even the walls were removed and burned. Damian was placed in 24-hour surveillance, moved to an undisclosed psych facility, and officially listed as a level 4 threat, a rating reserved for serial offender potential. Janine was placed on leave and entered counseling. She later resigned after being diagnosed with acute stress disorder and visual hallucinations related to the encounter. Damian, still alive, still detained, still drawing. When state investigators reviewed his belongings, they found more than 300 sketches, many of them showing female guards tied up, carved open, or served on plates. One depicted Janine specifically, smiling as her own organs were offered to her on a tray. The American Correctional Association now requires any juvenile flagged for zoosadism or cannibalistic ideation to be isolated from female staff immediately, a rule created after Damian's case went public. But if you think that's the bottom, it gets worse, because in our final entry, we uncover the most evil kid of them all, a boy who didn't just destroy a female, physically or emotionally, he recruited others to do it. Tariq Menendez and Officer Carla Reeves, the orchestrated breakdown. Tariq Menendez didn't need fists, he didn't need a weapon, he just needed leverage and a few loyal followers. At 17, Tariq was already known as a shot caller for one of Chicago's most violent teen sets. He entered juvenile detention not as a scared kid, but as a celebrity. His crimes? 2 murders, 4 attempted hits, and racketeering, all before he finished high school algebra. But what he pulled on Officer Carla Reeves was beyond criminal. It was psychological terrorism. Carla was respected and firm, but fair. She ran the D Unit, a high-risk wing for gang-affiliated male teens. The facility believed that giving such units a female officer would balance aggression with empathy. They were wrong. Tariq saw it as a challenge. In his first week, he asked innocent questions. "How old are you? You married?" She ignored him. Then came the mimicry. He trained other inmates to walk like Carla, speak like her, even mock the way she tied her shoes. It was subtle, but constant. Every hallway she entered, someone giggled. Every time she gave instructions, they stared blankly, mouthing her words behind her back. Carla began second-guessing herself. Staff assumed she was being too sensitive. Then it escalated. Tariq had a copy of her divorce records printed out and posted to the inside of his cell. How did he get them? Still unknown, but it humiliated her. Soon after, she started receiving anonymous notes through food trays. "No wonder your man left. Heard you cry in the parking lot again." Her car was keyed, her tires slashed. Her mother's phone number was somehow passed around to inmates' girlfriends on the outside. Still, the facility wouldn't transfer her. Then came the final final blow. During a mock lockdown drill, Carla was asked to isolate 3 inmates, including Tariq. When she entered his room, someone on the unit triggered a false fire alarm. While chaos erupted, another inmate filmed her in the cell, edited the footage, then posted a clip online with the caption, "Female guard gets cozy with top dog." The video exploded. Even though facility security debunked it instantly, the damage was irreversible. Carla faced suspension. Internal Affairs opened a probe. Meanwhile, Tariq laughed during every meeting, reportedly telling his caseworker, "I don't need to touch her, I just bend reality." Carla suffered a nervous breakdown 2 days after returning to work. She was hospitalized for psychiatric care and never stepped foot in a facility again. Tariq was later transferred to adult prison after turning 18. On his last day, he reportedly told the chaplain, "One down, many more to go." His story was cited in the 2025 National Juvenile Officer Association report as the most organized psychological breakdown of a female corrections officer ever orchestrated by a minor. And now we come full circle. 9 female officers, 9 evil kids, 1 horrifying truth. To enjoy more of such videos, click on the card showing on the screen.